The cafeteria had emptied hours ago, but Eleanor stayed. She always stayed. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as she wiped down the stainless steel counters for the third time, her reflection distorted in the gleaming surface. At 53, she had learned that busyness kept the loneliness at bay, that the rhythmic motion of cleaning gave her hands something to do besides tremble. The school sat empty now. That peculiar silence of a building meant for hundreds suddenly holding only one. She pushed a strand of graying hair behind her ear and moved to check the walk-in refrigerator, her sneakers squeaking against the linoleum. The autumn wind rattled the windows, and somewhere in the building, a door slammed shut. Eleanor paused, dish rag suspended mid-motion. She was alone. She was always alone after 4 o'clock. The sound came again, closer now. Footsteps in the hallway outside the cafeteria doors. Heavy, deliberate, wrong. Her heart stuttered in her chest as the double door swung open, and she found herself face to face with a man who should not exist. He was impossibly tall, dressed in a suit that cost more than her annual salary, his features carved from marble and shadow. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath, ancient and gold and burning with something that made every instinct in her body scream to run. She did not run. She had spent too many years learning that running only made predators chase. He studied her with those impossible eyes, his head tilting slightly, as if she were a puzzle he had not expected to encounter. The silence stretched between them, thick and suffocating, until he spoke in a voice like velvet dragged over broken glass. "Eleanor Chen." It was not a question. She gripped the dish rag tighter, knuckles whitening. "The school is closed. You need to leave." Something flickered across his face, gone too quickly to name. He took a step closer, and she noticed that he cast no shadow beneath the fluorescent lights, that the air around him seemed to bend and darken. "You've been kind to my son." The words hung in the air between them, and Eleanor felt the world tilt beneath her feet. His son. She thought of the pale boy who sat alone at the corner table every day, the one with the dark circles under his eyes and the lunch he never ate. Marcus. The other children avoided him, with the instinctive cruelty of youth, whispering about his strange stillness, his cold skin, the way he never seemed to breathe. She had started sitting with him 3 weeks ago, after she found him crying in the storage closet, silent tears tracking down cheeks too pale to be healthy. "Marcus," she breathed, and the man's expression shifted into something almost human. "He speaks of you constantly, the lunch lady who shares her cookies, who asks about his day, who does not look at him like he is a monster." His voice cracked on the last word, and Eleanor saw it then, beneath the terrifying power and the inhuman grace. A father, desperate and afraid and holding his breaking child together with both hands. She set down the dish rag and faced him fully, this creature of nightmare and legend, this king of things that should not be. "He's lonely," she said simply. "Children shouldn't be that lonely." The vampire king went utterly still, a predator's stillness, the kind that preceded violence or collapse. She watched him choose collapse. His shoulders dropped a fraction of an inch, and when he spoke again, the velvet was gone from his voice, leaving only gravel and grief. His mother was human. She died bringing him into the world, and I have spent 14 years trying to give him what she would have, trying to make him feel less caught between two worlds that both reject him. He moved to one of the cafeteria tables and sat, the gesture so unexpectedly mundane that Eleanor found herself moving toward him without conscious thought. The vampire courts see him as weak, tainted by mortal blood. The human world sees him as wrong, something to be feared and avoided. And I, who have ruled for 3 centuries, who have ended wars and built empires, cannot fix this. Cannot make a single child stop calling him a freak. Cannot make him smile the way he used to smile. Eleanor sat across from him, the same table where she had shared countless meals with students who needed someone to see them. Why are you here? What do you want from me? I want to understand. His golden eyes met hers, and she saw centuries of isolation in their depths. What do you do? What magic do you possess that makes him come home and speak of warm cookies and questions about his favorite books? He has tutors who cost fortunes, guards who would die for him, a father who would burn the world to ash for his happiness. And yet it is you, a human woman in a hairnet, who has reached him. The word struck something deep in Eleanor's chest, a well of feeling she had thought long dry. She thought of her own son, gone these 20 years now, taken by a war in a country whose name she still could not say without her voice breaking. She thought of the grief that had hollowed her out, that had sent her husband running and left her here, serving food to other people's children, collecting their smiles like coins against the darkness. There's no magic, she said quietly. I just see him, not what he is, but who he is. A lonely boy who likes science fiction novels and hates the texture of mashed potatoes. Who does his homework during lunch because he has no one to talk to. Who flinches when the other children get too close, not because he might hurt them, but because he expects them to hurt him. The Vampire King's hands clenched on the table, and she watched him master an emotion too large for his ancient face. You speak of him as if he were simply a child. Because he is. Whatever else he might be, whatever blood runs in his veins, he's a child who wants someone to be kind to him. That's not complicated. We make it complicated, we adults, with our fears and our categories and our need to separate the world into safe and dangerous. Children just want to be loved. Silence fell between them, heavy with things unsaid. Outside, the sun had begun its descent, painting the windows gold and crimson. The Vampire King would need to leave soon, she realized. Even rulers had to respect the burning light. He stood, and she stood with him, two people caught in a moment that neither had expected. He was looking at her differently now, the predator's assessment replaced by something that might have been wonder. You are not afraid of me. It was not a question, but she answered anyway. I've been afraid for 20 years, afraid of the dark, afraid of the silence, afraid of the empty rooms in my house where my son used to laugh. Being afraid is exhausting, and I'm too old to waste my energy on it anymore. You're frightening, yes, but you're also a father who loves his son, and that I understand. He reached into his jacket and withdrew a card, black as onyx, with silver script that seemed to move when she was not looking directly at it. If you ever need anything, anything at all, you have only to ask. Eleanor took the card, felt it pulse with cold against her fingers. I don't want anything. I just want Marcus to be okay. That, the Vampire King said, is precisely why you will have anything you desire. He moved toward the door, pausing at the threshold. My name is Alexander, and you have given my son something I could not buy with all the wealth of my centuries. You have given him hope. He was gone between one heartbeat and the next, the doors swinging gently in his wake, leaving Eleanor alone with the buzzing lights and the weight of what had just occurred. The next morning, she found Marcus, waiting outside the cafeteria before the first bell, his pale face nervous, his hands clutched around a book. Mrs. Chen, my father said he spoke to you. He didn't scare you, did he? He could be intense. Eleanor smiled and unlocked the doors, gesturing him inside. He was perfectly lovely, very concerned about you. The boy's shoulders dropped with relief, and he followed her into the kitchen, hovering as she began prep for the day. He's never talked to anyone at my schools before. He usually just makes us move when things get bad." She handed him a cookie, still warm from the batch she had baked before dawn. "Eat something. You're too thin." He took the cookie, and she saw his eyes flicker red for just a moment, a flash of something hungry and inhuman. Then he blinked, and he was just Marcus again, a lonely boy trying to find his place in a world that refused to make room for him. "Do you know what I am, Mrs. Chen? I know you're a young man who needs breakfast. I know you're kind to the younger children when you think no one is watching. I know you cried when we read Old Yeller in class last year, and that you pretend you didn't." The cookie crumbled slightly in his grip, and she watched him struggle with something too big for his 14 years. "My mother was human, like you." Eleanor set down her spatula and gave him her full attention. "Tell me about her." "I don't remember her. She died when I was born. But my father keeps pictures, and he tells me stories, and sometimes he cries when he thinks I'm asleep." His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. He loved her more than anything in any world, and she loved him enough to die bringing me into existence. I'm supposed to be special because of that. The bridge between two peoples. But I'm not a bridge. I'm just caught in the middle. Not enough of either thing to belong anywhere. She moved around the counter and took his hands, cold as ice, clutching hers like lifelines. "You belong here. Right now, in this moment, you belong exactly where you are. And tomorrow, you'll belong somewhere else. And the day after that, somewhere new, because belonging isn't a destination. It's a choice you make every single day. You choose where to put your heart, and that's where you belong." He stared at her, and she saw his father's ancient eyes looking back, carrying burdens no child should bear. "How do you know?" "Because I've spent 20 years learning it the hard way. Because I lost my son and my husband and my faith in almost everything, and I had to rebuild myself from nothing. And what I learned is that we belong to the people who see us, not our blood, not our species, not the world we were born into. We belong to the ones who choose us back." Marcus did not cry. Perhaps vampires could not cry. Or perhaps he had simply learned to hold his tears too deep for release. But he squeezed her hands, and something in his face shifted, softened, opened. The weeks that followed brought changes Eleanor had not anticipated. Marcus began eating breakfast in the cafeteria, not blood, which she learned he took in private, but the human foods she prepared. Toast and eggs and fruit, eaten slowly, more for comfort than nutrition. Other students began to notice. The strange boy who sat with the lunch lady, laughing at her jokes, helping her carry supplies. The whispers continued, but they shifted in tone, curiosity replacing fear. Then the dream started. She woke 3 nights in succession to find herself standing in a garden she had never seen, surrounded by flowers that bloomed in colors human eyes were not designed to perceive. Alexander was always there, waiting in the shadows, watching her with those burning golden eyes. "You are changing him," he said on the 3rd night, his voice carrying across the impossible distance between them. "He smiles now. He speaks of the future, as if it might contain something worth living for. I'm not doing anything special. I'm just being present. You underestimate yourself." He moved closer, and she noticed that in this dream space, he cast a shadow after all, long and dark, and reaching toward her, like a living thing. "My advisors are concerned. Human with such influence over the heir to the Dark Throne is dangerous. They counsel me to remove you, to erase your memory, to send Marcus somewhere you cannot reach him." Fear should have gripped her then, but she found only exhaustion and a strange, fierce protectiveness. "And what do you counsel yourself?" I counsel myself that my son has laughed more in the past month than in the past 5 years. That he has stopped hiding in his room, stopped counting the days until he is old enough to walk into the sun. That he has begun to live, truly live, for the first time since he learned what his blood meant. His shadow touched her feet, cold and electric, and she felt the weight of his attention like a physical force. I counsel myself that you are a gift I did not earn and do not deserve, and that I will end anyone who tries to take you from him. Eleanor woke in her own bed, the taste of impossible flowers on her tongue, and knew that her life had changed in ways she could not yet understand. The card Alexander had given her sat on her nightstand, pulsing gently with its own dark light, a promise, and a warning, and an invitation all at once. The attack came on a Tuesday. Eleanor was walking to her car after a late shift when the shadows around her thickened and twisted, and 3 figures emerged from the darkness with eyes like dying stars. "The human," one of them hissed, "who presumes to touch the prince." She did not run. She thought of Marcus, of his shy smile, of the way he had started calling her Auntie Elle when no one else could hear. She thought of her son, lost so long ago, and how she had promised herself she would never again fail to protect a child in her care. "I presume nothing," she said, her voice steady, despite her hammering heart. "I simply care for a boy who needs caring for." "He is not a boy. He is an abomination, half-breed filth that taints the pure bloodline. And you, human cow, are making him soft, making him forget his place." They circled her, predators scenting prey, and she knew with cold certainty that she was going to die in this parking lot. She was going to die, and Marcus would blame himself, and all her work would be undone. The first vampire lunged, claws extended, mouth open in a snarl of hatred and hunger. Eleanor closed her eyes and thought of cookies and morning sunlight, and a pale boy learning to smile. The impact never came. She opened her eyes to find Marcus standing between her and her attackers, his small form trembling with rage, his eyes blazing red in the darkness. "Touch her," he said, and his voice was not a child's voice, not anymore. "And I will show you exactly what half-breed filth can do." "Little Prince," the lead vampire's tone dripped with contempt, "this is not your concern. Return to your father's house and leave the adults to their work." "She is my concern. She is the only person in this entire world who has ever looked at me and seen something worth loving." The boy's hands curled into fists, and Eleanor felt the air pressure drop, felt reality itself bend around his fury. "My father rules the Dark Throne. My mother died to give me life. And I am done. Do you hear me? I am done being ashamed of what I am." He moved faster than Eleanor's eyes could track, a blur of darkness and desperate courage. When he stopped moving, 2 of the vampires were on the ground, unmoving, and the third was pressed against a car with Marcus's hand around his throat. "You will tell the courts that the prince has chosen his allies. You will tell them that Eleanor Chen is under my protection, now and forever. And you will tell them that if anyone touches her again, I will come for them, and I will not be merciful." The vampire vanished when Marcus released him, fleeing into the shadows with his fallen companions. Marcus turned to Eleanor, and she saw him struggling to contain the power still crackling around him, the ancient inheritance of his father's blood warring with the gentle soul his mother's love had shaped. She opened her arms, and he fell into them, shaking, a 14-year-old boy who had just committed violence to protect someone he loved. "Shh," she murmured, stroking his cold hair, feeling his ragged breaths against her shoulder. "Shh, sweetheart. You're okay. We're okay. I could have killed them. I wanted to kill them. What does that make me? It makes you someone who loves fiercely. There's no shame in that. There's only the choice of what to do with it." Alexander found them there 20 minutes later, still holding each other in the parking lot. Eleanor's cardigan wrapped around Marcus's shoulders, against a chill he could not feel. The Vampire King said nothing. He simply knelt beside them, his ancient face crumbling with emotion, and wrapped his arms around them both. The ceremony took place 3 months later, in a hall that existed between worlds, where the veil between human and vampire was thin enough to walk through. Eleanor stood before the assembled courts in a dress that had been sewn from moonlight and shadow, her gray hair crowned with flowers that would never wilt, and listened as Alexander spoke the words that would change everything. By the ancient laws that bind our kind, I name Eleanor Chen, guardian of the air, protector of the prince, and honored mother of the royal house. Her blood is sacred, her life is precious, her word carries the weight of throne law. Marcus stood beside her, tall and proud in his ceremonial robes, no longer hiding from the eyes that watched him. He had grown in these months, not just in height, but in spirit. The broken boy she had found crying in a storage closet transformed into something luminous and strong. I have a mother now, he said to the assembly, his voice ringing clear. Not the one who gave me life, but the one who taught me how to live it, and I will spend eternity being worthy of her love. Eleanor felt tears tracking down her cheeks, felt the weight of centuries of tradition bending to make room for one human woman and the boy she had chosen. She thought of her son, gone so long now, and knew with sudden clarity that he would have been proud. The reception that followed was a blur of impossible foods and impossible faces, vampires and other beings she had no names for, all of them regarding her with curiosity and grudging respect. Alexander stayed close, his hand occasionally brushing her arm, a gesture of intimacy she had not expected from him. You could still leave, he said during a quiet moment. Return to your life, your world. You have done more than anyone could ask. Is that what you want? He turned to face her fully, and she saw 3 centuries of loneliness in his eyes. 3 centuries of ruling alone, loving a memory, raising a child in the dark. I want you to stay, he said quietly. Not for Marcus, though he needs you. Not for the courts, though you have transformed them. I want you to stay, because in all my long years, I have never met anyone who looked at me the way you do, as if I were simply a man, a father, something other than a monster. Eleanor reached up and touched his face, her warm hand against his cold cheek, feeling the impossible stillness of a body that did not need to breathe. You are not a monster. You are not simply a king. You are Alexander, and you love your son, and you make terrible coffee, and you have been alone for far too long. He laughed, a sound like breaking ice, like spring arriving after endless winter. How do you know about the coffee? Marcus tells me everything, including the fact that his father watches cooking shows at 3 in the morning and still burns toast. The years that followed were strange and wonderful, a human lifetime spent in the spaces between worlds. Eleanor watched Marcus grow into his power, watched him bridge the gap between humans and vampires in ways no one had thought possible, watched him fall in love and make mistakes, and learn from both. She watched Alexander soften, the ancient predator giving way to something almost gentle, something that could sit in a cafeteria and eat cookies and laugh at terrible jokes. She grew old in their world, as humans do, her hair turning white, her steps slowing, her heart wearing out despite the magic that surrounded her. But she was never lonely, never afraid, never again convinced that the darkness held only monsters. On her last night, she lay in a bed carved from ancient wood, surrounded by faces she had grown to love. Marcus held her hand, still cold after all these years, his red eyes bright with tears he had finally learned to shed. Alexander stood at the window, looking out at stars that humans never saw. His shoulders bowed with a grief too large for words. "You have to let me go," she whispered. "I know," Marcus breathed, "but I don't want to. I'll find you again. Somewhere beyond all this, I'll find you, and I'll bring cookies, and we'll talk about books, and everything will be okay." He pressed his forehead to their joined hands, and she felt his love like sunlight, warm and fierce and eternal. The darkness came gently, and Eleanor Chen closed her eyes for the last time, smiling, held safe in the arms of the monsters who had taught her how to live.